button.
Sorry. There's two buttons and it says got it or leave. I clicked the wrong one, my bad.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Monkey Business. Today we're discussing The Lord of the Rings, The Rings of Power. Now, before we begin, quick spoiler warning. Not only will we be spoiling episodes 1 through 5 of The Rings of Power, but we'll also be bringing up book lore, potentially Peter Jackson Lord of the Rings films, maybe even the Hobbit films, as well as we'll also be presenting our own theories on where we think the show's heading. So, if you don't want to live out the rest of your life Middle-earth with these spoilers, it's your last chance. Stop listening, sail west for the undying lands of blissful ignorance. But for those who choose to stay and battle with me in Middle-earth, let's meet our company. I'm one of your hosts, Warren, a lonely craftsman who admires all who can divine from the plainness of what is the beauty of what could be. Next up, I've seen him use that halyard proper 100 times. That was deliberate. That's our fearless crewmate Carter. How fare thee?
I fare well.
And finally, in an act of magnanimity, we have chosen to honor his accomplishments rather than dwell on his insolence. It's our favorite Harfoot Will. How fare thee?
I don't know. I'm pretty sure that I'd be left at the back of the pack during migration, but it's all good, I guess.
We all loved him, but he was an idiot.
Yes.
Best line ever. Killed by bees.
So a quick note on how we're going to structure this. Instead of jumping back and forth between the different story threads, we're just going to separate each of the story threads into their own topic of discussion. For example, we're going to start with Galadriel and Halbrand and Numenor. And then after that, we'll switch to the next plot thread. So kind of makes sense to start with Galadriel because that's where the story starts. So we start with our cold open. We have young Galadriel. She's making a paper boat. The whole scene with the other kids throwing rocks at it, trying to sink it. And there's that touching chat with her brother Finrod. They're having this discussion about something that'll come up quite frequently throughout the show, is this theme of light versus dark. And basically Galadriel asks Finrod, the lights in the sky, they're reflected on the water. How do I know which one the real light is? Or essentially, how do I know what's right? Because sometimes it's hard to tell. As we'll see throughout the rest of the show, that theme of light versus dark comes up quite a lot. So that was a cool way to introduce it at the beginning. So after that, we jump straight into a historical account of the war against Morgoth, which happens prior to the events of the show. Carter, this was in the first stage, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so we see all this stuff happening in the first stage. So we have a couple scenes of the battle against Morgoth. Reminded me a lot of the beginning of the Fellowship of the Ring, with Galadriel recounting all the stuff that had happened, with these brief scenes of the battles going on. One of the things that was really cool was that shot of Finrod and a bunch of elven warriors fighting just hordes of orcs as the rain's pouring and the battle's raging on. Just the sheer number of extras for that battle scene, it's pretty remarkable. But also there is such a striking contrast between the elegance of the fancy elf armor and then just the motley like rags and botched together armor that all the orcs are using. Makes the battle look really cool. Also, there's another shot in there afterwards of the aftermath of the battle where there's like I guess it's a city it's like a sunken city or something, but it's like the bodies floating in the water with red light with the ruins.
Red. Yeah.
That looks so cool. Yeah.
Do we know what that was? Do you think that was just one of the continents that sunk? Which you'll get into, I guess. It was like a 2-second shot and they haven't referenced it since.
Yeah, that would be my guess, but I don't know for sure. I just really liked how it looked.
Yeah.
Another kind of last thing we're talking about in that opening sequence. Such a cool shot of Galadriel picking up a single helmet of a dead soldier. And then the very next shot, the way it's framed, there's this giant pile of at least thousands of helmets. And she's slowly putting one on. The way it's framed, she just looks tiny in comparison. Such a cool shot just to reinforce how deadly the battle was. That's not the right word. What's the word I'm looking for?
Catastrophic, I guess.
That works, yeah. Just the scope that we're dealing with. I thought that was a really cool way to show it. So right off the bat, establishing shots. This is, in my opinion, possibly the thing that the Peter Jackson films and Rings of Power do better than anything else. Establishing shots are so good. So there are a few ways they use it. So one is the map of Middle-earth. They use quite frequently. It'll show the map and then zoom in on a place and then show the place in live action. Super cool. And myself as a visual learner, just seeing the actual geography of the map helps so much, orienting where we are in the world and also world immersion. It helps with that so much. And there's some really cool transitions from the map to the live action of the world. So like it'll zoom in on this spot on the map and then transition that to, the sea or the mountain or whatever it is. Some really cool transitions there. Then you got your classic aerial shots over the mountain, with the scenery in New Zealand there. Some really cool shots. But also my personal favorite, these aerial shots of these fictional locations, some of them are just gorgeous. With Linden as the sun setting over the mountain, the waterfall cascading the valley below. You have Region with the super cool waterfall that flows into the city. And then, of course, Khazad-dûm with all the hustle and bustle on those bridges, the light shining down into the depths of the cavern. Also, Numenor looks super cool, especially at night, with how the city is just sprawling into the mountain with the ships in the harbor. Some really cool shots of these different places. Okay. Anyways, back to the story. So we start out with Galadriel and her company. They're hunting far in the north. They're looking for Sauron. Of course, Galadriel is very bent on revenge. You may ask, why are they hunting in the north for Sauron? Because as we'll find out later, he's not in the north, but in the south. Well, I'm glad you asked, Will. As it turns out, the reason why they're searching the north is because in the first stage, so as we know, Sauron was basically Morgoth's like right-hand man, kind of his like second in command. Morgoth's original base, Utumno, was okay. So let me back up a step. Obviously, for the audio format, it's going to be a little difficult to visualize these places on the map. So what I'm going to do is, for those who don't have a map sitting right in front of them, I'm going to make an analogy of the map of the USA, of where these places would be if Middle-earth were the USA. Okay, so as an analogy, where Sauron actually is, down in what will become Mordor, let's call that Florida. Okay, yeah, so Sauron's in Florida, just vacationing on the beach. Morgoth's original base back in the first stage was in Utumno, which is northwest of Angmar, and we're going to call that like the Michigan-Wisconsin area. So it's pretty far north, basically the north of the continent. And then later on, his base that he'd established later, Angband, was further west, but also super far north. So I'm going to call that like Montana-ish. So that's why they're searching very far north, is because that's where Morgoth and Sauron had set up camp and had been for quite a while. So they just assume that Sauron's still in the north. That's why they're searching up there. Okay. So to move on. So they find this abandoned stronghold. And I'm not sure, it could be Utumno that they found this ice fortress. I'm not sure. Either way, they find this place. There's a really cool shot as they're walking into this place, as they're walking into the cave. I'm not sure if it's a zoom shot zooming out or if the camera's actually moving like a dolly shot backwards or something as well. But as they're walking into the cavern, the camera's like moving and zooming backwards. And this pile of rocks that we see, turns out it's actually a troll hand. I thought that was really cool.
I think it's just a change of focus. I think they have the camera locked down and they have a long range focus at first, and then they walk in and then they just change focus to up close, and what was appeared to be just rubble turns into the hand and you see it move.
Yeah, there's definitely a change of focus. I think it was definitely zooming backwards as well.
Might have been.
Zooming out. But either way, yeah, it was I thought it was a pretty clever shot. But anyways, so they take on the Snow Troll. They go back home to Linden. They found this Mark of Sauron, but who knows when it was left there. And basically the company mutinies.
So real quick, I want to talk about that Mark of Sauron.
Okay.
Why on earth is it in the north? Because it's a symbol, as later talked about in episode, was it 4, that resembles his base in the south.
It's a map. Yeah.
It's a map. It's Mordor.
Yeah. So why is it in the north? Why is it in this obscure northern place when Morgoth or Sauron hasn't even set his base anew yet in the bottom south? What orc went all the way up there to the north to put it there? Or why is it on the anvil? Was that always Morgoth's plan? I guess that could be it.
Presumably this mark was left here at this point hundreds, maybe even thousands of years ago. And so any of the orcs that found this would be like, oh, we have to go all the way down to the Southlands.
All right, I'm willing to live with that explanation, because it really was a question that I was thinking about the second they found Galadriel found out what it really meant up at the library. As I was going, well, why did he draw this to represent a diagram of the map, or it's made to represent where he is, but now it's used by the orcs? So this spy made the symbol. The
Well,
orcs
Sauron
found
also
it, and then
there's also the same symbol on Finrod. So presumably Sauron was using this mark quite a bit.
okay. I
And
guess
it's on the sword, right?
it just looks like the sword, I think.
I don't remember if it's on the sword or not. I don't remember it
Maybe not.
being there. I don't know for sure.
For me, I just thought it felt I felt like it was a really good characteristic of the story building to have like this symbol that they're chasing down, something to put together clues and all that and to research. I just thought that the library explanation was very faulty or very loose and not well thought out. Do you guys have thoughts on that or no?
How so?
Again, it was the spy wrote this symbol down to resemble the location of where it was, and it just got me thinking. Okay, but the elvish spy used it to record it as a map, but the rest of Morgoth's army is using it as their symbol of warfare. It was just weird that it would have that simple of an explanation, and I kind of wanted a little more from it. Am I making sense?
Yeah,
Yeah, I think that's fair.
to me at least.
Yeah, well, I don't want to get hung up on this too much, but I don't think it's like a symbol of war. It's more just so I think it's implied that it's just a way for everyone who's left who didn't get killed off in the war to just be able to find Sauron. Like, oh, he's down in the Southlands, you know.
Okay. And was that in the show, or is that just you thinking?
No, that's just what seems to be implied.
Okay.
But as far as the spy, like that's a super obscure, just kind of one person, and nobody thought it was important, so they just stowed it away in this random library. That seemed to be the feel I got.
Okay. I just thought it would have been cooler to maybe have just Galadriel put two and two together to just see it on its side and do one of those like, oh my goodness.
Well, also if you look at it when they're side by side, you can see that it
Mhm.
resembles the map. But when you just see the mark by itself, it doesn't look like a map at all. It looks like a sword. Like it looks like a little dagger.
A hilt, yeah.
Yeah. So that would also be, it's not obvious immediately that it's supposed to be a map. But yeah, that's definitely a good point. So anyways, as we head back to Linden, basically as we learn from a conversation between Elrond and Galadriel, this entire company, it looks like they're the bad guys because they're turning their back and not going with Galadriel further north. As it turns out, Galadriel's really the one who's defying the king by going out this far. They weren't supposed to be out this long or going this far north or whatever. As Elrond frames it, instead of punishing her for disobeying, he's choosing to grant them really this great honor to go to Valinor. And Galadriel will ultimately reject it, but it's kind of highlights how she views things because she thinks that, she's been betrayed and like people won't help her when really she's the one who's been betraying and not listening to other people. But anyways, as we continue, so their ship is sailing west. If you want to think about it, it's like they're in the Pacific Ocean, sailing from California going west over to Valinor. But ultimately, Galadriel jumps overboard, decides not to go to Valinor, and she's swimming and swimming and swimming some more and swimming for quite a while. Ultimately, she's temporarily saved by a group of shipwrecked humans who their ship has been destroyed by some form of sea monster. She's on board for about 2 minutes before the sea monster comes back and she gets pushed off and she swims away and she's swimming for a little while more. And actually, while she's swimming, I thought it was really cool. The one shot where she's swimming and the camera is going under the water and over the water and under the water and over the water. I thought it did a really cool job of selling the panic of running away from the sea monster. I thought that was really cool. But yeah, ultimately, Galadriel and Halbrand escape on this little raft, and ultimately they're saved by Elendil, who is the father of Isildur. Oh, before that though, so when they're still sailing west, back to our theme of light and dark, before we see their ship, the shot immediately before it, Theo's holding the essentially like, I'm just going to call it the cursed sword because I don't know what to call it, but Theo finds the sword and he's holding it, and then you hear the whispering of black speech, and the next scene cuts immediately to Galadriel's ship sailing towards Valinor, and there's beautiful light everywhere, and there's an elven choir singing, and like the sun's on their faces. And then the very next scene after that is High King Gil-galad picks up the poisoned leaf, and it's just a constant contrast between the light and the dark, switching back and forth. Really cool visually. So, anyways, Elendil finds them, takes them to Numenor, and Numenor we meet some characters. One of the interesting things about their rival Numenor is just how impactful, and it's not clear right off the bat, but just how impactful it is that they're bringing an elf into Numenor. There are a lot of political tensions that entails. So as Queen Regent Muriel says, basically trying to downplay, like, she's just one elf. Like, come on, give me a break. And then Pharazôn says, an avalanche can start with one stone. We dare not invite your father's cloud back overhead, which is just a very short and simple sentence, but carries so much weight because, as we learn later, Muriel's father, who is still technically the king, but in actuality, not really. He's basically been exiled in place. He was basically overthrown for wanting to renew the alliance with the elves. And everyone
He's
in Numenor,
practically bedridden.
yeah.
So
And everyone in Numenor is like, no, thank you. Let's get him out of here. So he's basically just locked in his tower. Okay. So Muriel has this vision of the petals falling from this tree and Numenor getting destroyed by this giant flood. And she has this chat with Elendil where she says, the faithful believe that when the petals of the white tree fall, it is no idle thing, but the very tears of the Valar themselves, a living reminder that their eyes and their judgment are ever upon us. And then she basically asks Elendil, like, do you believe that? And he was like, well, in my experience, I mean, it's not a great idea to be guessing after signs and visions and stuff. Uh, it's another, I don't know if this counts as a theme, but something we see quite frequently throughout is how different characters believe in or respond to like fate or destiny or human autonomy or whatever you want to call this. I don't know if it counts as a theme, but different characters believe very different things about it. So, for example, Nori, she says, like, he could have landed anywhere, but he landed here. Like, I know it's important. Like, I was supposed to find him. I can't walk away from that. And there's this idea of destiny and people being in the right place at the right time. Some people believe in it, some people don't. Even Halbrand, when he first meets Galadriel, he talks about the tides of fate flowing. It's kind of fascinating. Some characters believe in fate, whereas other characters, they believe more along the lines of Tagomi from The Man in the High Castle, who had the brilliant line, fate is fluid, destiny is in the hands of men. So some people, that's just a thing to keep your eye on as we continue in the show. Some characters believe very strongly in that they're fated for this stuff to happen, and some characters don't. So with that in mind, Galadriel, obviously a bunch of stuff happens in Numenor, but I'll skip past some of that. Galadriel ultimately is trying to convince Halbrand to take up his title as King of the Southlands and go back with them with an army to go reconquer them. And Halbrand is a very interesting character, but for the most part, he's very resistant to the idea. And so Galadriel's trying to convince him over and over again. But one of the things that Galadriel keeps bringing up is that they were brought to this island for a reason, or they were put in each other's paths for a reason.
And Halbrand thinks that Numenor is his ticket to a peaceful, worry-free life. He wants to be there and just become a smith, become a sword maker, and just live out his days. He sees it as a utopia. Wants to just kind of.
Or does he?
Retire there, or does he?
Who knows? Who knows?
I guess we'll get to that.
I guess we will. Okay, so there's kind of a fun relationship with Galadriel and Elendil, because Galadriel, when she first escapes the palace, she's about to basically commandeer a boat. These are like little tiny fishing boats. I'm not going to make it anywhere. And she's about to just like toss somebody overboard and steal the boat and try to escape. And Elendil's just standing behind her. And he's like, it would be wiser to steal the half sail. The two of them have some great dialogue, but possibly my favorite part, Elendil rips out the zinger. I have a daughter who runs fast and a son who runs blind. Your eyes bear a striking resemblance to both. But I think it is fascinating how Galadriel, all these characters that she's meeting in Numenor, whether it's Elendil or Muriel or Halbrand or whoever, all these characters, she's learning slightly different things from them, but from all of them, she's learning to do more thinking before she acts because she rushes into a lot of things without thinking as much as she should.
And yet she consistently loves telling people that she's older, wiser, and more beat up than they.
Exactly. Which, again, you can kind of understand why a lot of people aren't so fond of the elves. They're, for the most part, pretty arrogant. Elendil, in their conversation, mentions that the Hall of Lore is a quarter day's ride away, to which Galadriel, in the famous words of Russell Wilson, says, Broncos Nation, let's ride. Anyways, in the Hall of Lore, like you're saying, they find out what the sigil of Sauron means. It's mapped at Southwinds. Ultimately, they realize that Sauron's plan is a lot bigger than they imagined, and time is more of a concern than they thought. So ultimately they convince Muriel to send an army with them back to the Southlands to go conquer Sauron once and for all, retake the Southlands, and everyone's on board with it initially, and then a couple characters don't want that to happen, and Pharazôn tries to convince Muriel to change her mind. Ultimately, Galadriel, Halbrand, Isildur, his two friends, Elendil, they're all sailing east. So basically, Numenor, if you want to think of it as Hawaii, they're all sailing from Hawaii back to Florida. So it doesn't quite work with the US geography, but they're sailing from Numenor back to Middle Earth, and they want to go reconquer the Southlands. Let's end that there and talk about some Harfoots.
So can we talk about some elf stuff, though?
Sure.
They should be speaking Elvish a whole lot more. I know I've said this before to you guys in person, but really for the podcast sake, I do really wish that the majority of episode 1 and episode 2, I guess, whenever the elves are talking to one another, it was just Elvish with subtitles. And I get that would be a lot of work and a lot of just really intense training in order to get everything flowing well. But I do think it would be worth it to help with world building and just kind of endear me towards the series a little bit more, to kind of feel that heart, because they do bring up that the characters do know Elvish from time to time. Just want more of it.
I'm kind of with you, but on the other hand, it's just an accessibility thing or watchability thing. Like, it's going to be, at least for some people, hard to watch if people are never speaking in English. You don't really want to be reading subtitles the whole time. So I do like when they use it, but I think using it sparingly probably is the right call, because it's hard to watch an entire show in a made-up language. Also be a ton of work for the actors.
Yeah, it's crazy that one of the biggest shows that Netflix has ever aired was totally not entirely in English, and that it was subtitled pretty much the entire time, and people read it and loved it.
Okay, but that's a real language.
True, but people still read the subtitles, right? And so
That's true.
I guess it's, if the story isn't compelling enough, people will stay.
Speaking of staying, maybe standing in place, Galadriel had a little Elvish basketball coach energy there with when she's giving the Numenorean soldiers like the sword lesson. It's like 4-on-1, and she keeps like easily beating them and giving them advice. Apparently, sword fight is a lot like basketball. It's not about your arms; it's about moving your feet. Don't plant roots; keep moving. Great basketball coach there. Defense is all about moving your feet.
Were you talking about Squid Game?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. I mean, like, that did have an English dub, and way too many people did watch it in the English dub.
Bruh, bunch of losers.
Which just shows how much of losers people are, you know?
Did I ever tell you one time I watched a show in Spanish, and I made it like 5 episodes before I realized that it wasn't in English? I just was watching the dubbed version. Oh.
Wonderful.
That's awesome, Warren.
Yeah, yeah, it is just a thing. It's like, it sucks. It's unfortunate, but you can't make your money back if you start episode 1, season 1 in another language. People aren't gonna stay for as long.
But I guess that's what I'm asking for
which
the creativity
is a
of it.
consumer problem. What?
Yeah, but that's what I'm asking, is that they think more about the creativity and the source material in this aspect than they do the numbers, but it's a multi-billion-dollar corporation.
Yeah, but we asked that for any movie ever made. But there are some people that will go for that, and there are some people that are restricted by companies who don't want to go for that. And they just focus on their profit incentives. So that's Amazon for you, unfortunately. But I don't know. It didn't affect me too much. I agree with you, but it's like, it's not an Elvish. Who cares, you know?
For me, yeah, more wishful thinking than genuine concern, but
Yeah,
I did
it'd be
really
nice.
miss
It's
it.
not like it doesn't like bring the showdown for me, I guess, personally.
On the bright side, we get Elvish and we get the Mordor language. What's it called? Black speech.
Yeah.
And I believe, was there also another language somewhere in there? I can't remember.
There's a little dwarvish tossed around.
Is there
I think there's some, at least names and stuff like that. When they're talking about
names don't
mithril and
really count?
stuff.
Yeah.
But either way, it's pretty cool that they at least have a couple languages in it. Also, watch for the future. This Farazan guy, he's looking like a shady character. They're classic. Oh, actually, one thing I wanted to ask you. That scene where there's like the riot against, like there's the riot against because they think that everyone's taking orders from the elf, and then Farazan goes out and talks everybody down and buys everybody drinks. Did you think it was implying that he was the one who incited the riot in the first place?
No.
Did you?
I thought it did seem like that because they made it very clear that he knows everybody, and he seemed awfully friendly with Tamar, who was the guy who was starting this riot in the first place.
I don't think he seems as shady as you. I personally don't think he's presented as someone who's definitely going to be this twist bad guy. Maybe you see otherwise, but I like he just has his own political ambitions at heart more so than he wants to actually care about going to the Southlands and defeating Sauron. It's like, yeah, that could turn into a villain
No, I don't think
kind of thing. It could
I
turn
don't
into
think he's anyone different because he actually is a
no,
character from the books. But
yeah,
he
it could turn
just
into a
the
problem.
way
It's like,
he's
yeah,
going behind people's backs, and he's
yeah,
very much like your politician who's doing all this shady stuff so that he can get more power.
yeah,
That's just every politician.
yeah,
I guess I just wish the elves were also wiser characters.
yeah,
They very much seem
dumbed down.
yeah, and childish in their wants or desires and motives.
Or in their tempers.
I disagree because I think it helps the story a lot because we don't have any of these characters who are know-it-alls or always right. I think seeing the elves in a different light, and I think having all these characters that we're seeing the story through not always be right, I think it helps the story a lot.
But I think Gilgalad and Galadriel even are presented as know-it-alls. And like they're arrogant. They have a very lofty
They're
opinion of
arrogant,
themselves. Yeah,
and they think
severely.
they know it all, but they don't.
That's what a know-it-all is, though. They're not actually wise in the way that Will said, he wishes they were wiser in the way that
Right.
they truly are in their characters, especially Galadriel. Especially Galadriel. But they're just kind of brats and they're just kind of just a freight train just plowing ahead and they do whatever they want and they're trying to get others to do whatever they want to. And it doesn't really seem true. I mean, like Gilgalad, they could get around that, and then he's definitely going to turn into someone who doesn't have everyone's best interest at heart, in my opinion.
Well,
But
clearly, yes.
Galadriel, like, isn't that person at all. I have major complaints with her character, and it's very, very possible they could turn it around and give her a incredible, incredible development arc as they weave her character through the 5 seasons and then end it where Lord of the Rings picks up, which
Well, I
would
think
be
that goes
awesome to
back
see.
to
But yeah,
I think it goes back to how the elves they kind of think they're better than everyone else, and like their view of time. 100 years is kind of like the blink of an eye. Well, maybe not 100 years, but like
yeah,
time means so much less to them
yeah,
that it's hard to think of everyone else as your equals.
yeah,
I think that really just also highlights how special Elrond and Durin's friendship is because Elrond is so loyal to him despite all this stuff and despite, well, we'll get into it later, but the impact that his loyalty to Durin has.
I guess to piggyback off of everything as well in there, to counter some of it, is that it's not necessarily how long someone lives, but what someone goes through that defines their maturity level, and also how they react to that. So for these elves who have gone through so much war coming from the Undying Lands to Middle Earth in order to fight off Sauron at the beginning, Galadriel, who remembers it, who lost her brother and all that stuff, usually that would create this softness towards war again, right? It's like we shouldn't want to fight more, or we shouldn't want to be rash. And she should also know the value of everyone working together in order to defeat a common enemy. But the Galadriel we see seems to take none of what has happened in her past and apply it to her current predicament. And maybe that is because the character is moving in a I am the only one who can see XX in this problem. Therefore, I am the only one who can stop it. I must lead. My plan must be the only one for success to happen. But I don't know. I just want her to be wiser, to be someone that everyone else would look up to because she is so old, and to defy this stereotype that is in Numenor of the elves always take, but it's like, I am giving you the freedom to help me. Please help. Please come to our aid so that war doesn't strike future generations and on and stuff like that.
So I'm going to disagree with you on the first part of what you're saying. Because she's experienced so much war and she's seen the terrible effects that it has, and all of these people that she knew and loved died because of it, she's basically spending her entire life trying to make sure it doesn't happen again. And she's chasing Sauron way into the north. She's going all over the continent trying to stop Sauron, even though pretty much everyone else has just forgotten about Sauron and figured, oh, maybe he died. Let's just forget about him. And she's like the only one who's still on that mission. She's the only one actively trying to stop the war that nobody else thinks will happen. Like you heard that line where she says it would take longer than your lifetime even to recount the names of all those I've lost. That's her drive for why she's trying to stop this war. And everyone else is just trying to forget about war and live their peaceful lives. And nobody even wants to think about the potential of war except for her.
We'll definitely talk a lot more when we do our end of season recap. And even then it's going to be hard because it's just the first season and I don't know where they're going with this character. But if they don't, it's hard to say. They could go a lot of different directions. And I don't want to say I need this to happen or else I'm going to hate the show, because that's absolutely not true. But supposedly in this show, she's over 5,000 years old at this point. So that's a lot of time. That's not old for an elf, but it's not young at all. So, I don't know. Also, I don't know, does it seem arrogant? Like, even if they do kind of develop her perfectly, they line it up, and when the show ends, she's her character in Lord of the Rings. Or maybe she's not that character yet, but she's on her way. Do you think it's like the writers are like, oh yeah, this story that we're gonna tell for Amazon for Rings of Power is gonna be the defining moment in her life. This right now is how she becomes Galadriel, who she really is, the Queen of Lorien and in the Lord of the Rings. And if you make the show incredible, that's justifiable. If the show isn't, this is just gonna really hurt her character, and which kind of sucks. I don't want to say too many negative things about it because again,
I don't think
not over.
I
But
mean, there's only so much that we see of Galadriel in the films. And even
yeah,
then, she's a very like multi-dimensional character.
yeah, and she actually truly is one of my favorite characters in Lord of the Rings. In
Okay.
just the films, like even before I read the books, she's like easily top 5, maybe top 3 even. And I just think she's like, yeah, as you said, so multidimensional, just a ton of depth to her. And then just seeing just this kind of one-track minded warlord from, in the show is not ideal for me. I don't think it's showcasing her wisdom at all. I don't think it's showcasing her kindness at all. And her just kind of she just plays everything cool. She has this kind of loftiness, but not arrogance, I feel, in the way that the Mirkwood elves absolutely do, and the way that the Rivendell elves kind of do. I feel like Lorien is the least of those because they're the ones that come to Rohan's aid at Helm's Deep, They're the ones that really, even though they are walled up in their forest more so than the others, they really do feel in touch with the world more so than the others. And I think as of now, that's lacking in the show. But again, we will see.
Okay. You want to move on to the Harfoots?
Down to a few are.
Sure, let's do it. All right, so the Harfoots are essentially a precursor to the Hobbits, and star among them, for the sake of the story, is Eleanor Kellemark Brandyfoot, a very curious little Harfoot, and she enjoys exploring, she enjoys knowing things, she enjoys just the berries, the snails, and everything that the forest has to offer them during their time as a nomadic tribe. But everything kind of turns up on its head for when the most interesting thing to ever happen to her life comes and falls out of the sky in the form of a stranger in a meteorite. And after Eleanor and her friend Poppy Proudfellow stumble into this meteorite crater, quite literally, they find out that the flames do not harm them, which is an interesting fact because when Galadriel's exploring in the north, the evil of the mines that are in all of the ice, I guess, cause their flames to not produce any heat as well because of the evil that's still there. Anyway, they relocate this gentleman using a wheelbarrow off to a more secure area away from the meteorite so that he won't be found. And in doing so, they wake him up and they find that he wants food and that there's a massive language barrier. But I guess more so than that, he can't communicate with them at all besides pointing and mimicking and using a little bit of magic, because at one point he gets across what he wants, and he wants to find a certain celestial star pattern or the meaning behind certain celestial star pattern by telling some fireflies to line up in the sky to show Poppy and Eleanor or Nori what they mean or what's special. But then these fireflies die, and every time we see the stranger use magic, there is some type of repercussion. Him falling from the sky creates the crater and the fire. Him talking to the fireflies causes death in the fireflies. Later on, he saves Poppy and Nori and one of the other ladies from the Harfoot tribe during their great migration. Oh, I should mention at this time that the stranger has become known to the Harfoot clan because while the Harfoots are getting ready to migrate because the seasons are changing, they have a big festival where they remember those who fell behind and died on their journeys. And the stranger kind of fumbles his way in, finding these pages to a book that have the exact same stars on them. And so it kind of plays into this omen after omen after omen occurs, or bad omen after bad omen after bad omen occurs inside the Harfoot area after the stranger arrives. Everything's going great, and then the stranger comes in, and then doom and gloom in a few areas. Nori's dad's foot gets hurt. They have to travel at the back of the migration caravan because of all the help that Nori's been giving to the stranger. It's seen as a bad thing because they're supposed to keep to themselves and hide away. Even all of their caravans are designed to blend into the foliage, which is an incredibly cute and adorable touch. So
everyone sticks to the path, nobody walks alone.
Mm-hmm. And then the stranger kind of warms up to himself. He realizes all the pressures that he's put on Nori and the family by helping them pull the cart since the dad's foot got injured. And then they come to this forest, and the forest has tracks of these large animals. They look like wargles, I think is what they're called from, or what is it that the orcs ride?
Wargs.
Wargs.
Would you say Wordles?
No, wargles. Sorry, their wargles are from the
What's the
Rangers
Daily
Apprentice
Wargle,
series.
guys?
Wargles are from the Rangers Apprentice series. That's my apologies.
Okay.
Anyway, he fights off three of them by doing essentially a thunderclap with his arm. He smashes on the ground, an airwave goes out, and his arm gets incredibly bruised. He goes away. Everyone's like, oh my gosh, he saved the day, he saved the day. And then he goes off and he puts his arm into a basin of water, and he chants a spell. The spell freezes the water, freezes his arm, but heals it in the process. Nori looks and goes, ooh, stranger doing magic stuff, puts her hand, touches the ice, her hand becomes ice as well, or gets iced over as well, and she gets freaked out because of all the magic. And then we're left with the final scene that we see of the stranger is him kind of with this 1,000-yard stare towards where Nori's running away out of fear because he's using magic, and the trees overhead are moving of their own accord, and ominous music swells. The only other thing we're really given of the stranger, and I guess foreshadowing towards all of the avenues that are going to eventually end up at him, is that we have these strange cultists who are only in 30-second shot, maybe max. And I believe it's 3 characters who are very gaunt looking, very serious, and they appear at the crash site of the stranger. And that's all we're given from what's all we know. But they don't look like friendly people. So what do you guys think about them, or are we saving those for later?
So, fun fact, these cultists, you know how one of the cultists was holding up that basically like a big plate? I don't know what it was, but it looked like a big metal plate. If you look carefully on the back of that, as the camera goes behind them, on the back of that plate is etched into the metal the same constellation that the stranger has been searching for this whole time. So I've seen a couple theories. Some people think that there's some sort of essentially werewolves and that they were the 3 wolves who attacked the stranger. It's possible. 3
I think
cultists,
that's
3
dumb.
wolves.
But I really do. I think that's a very weak fan theory. If it is, I
Yeah,
think it's
'cause, like,
incredibly unoriginal, but
because they show up before the wolf attack, right?
yes,
Or is it after?
they showed
Okay.
before.
Never mind.
Just food for thought.
It is, and the wolves didn't look like normal wolves. They looked like
Well, it
they had
looked
like
like
warthog-esque
it looked like
tusks.
the same
Which was
wolf that we
weird.
saw in episode 1 that the
I think it
Harfords
looked.
are running away from.
At the berry patch, yeah.
Did it? Okay, okay.
Yeah. But the stranger hadn't crashed down yet. So I guess that's the argument against it. Also, if they had been in the area
Yeah.
around that time, then those creatures would 100% have gone there earlier and been around the area earlier. They would have disrupted the migration ceremony, I think. And why wait till they have trekked across half the stinking continent to attack them then? They would have been much better suited to attack them in the marshes,
Well,
or attack them in the
actually,
mountains,
so
or
okay,
attack them
back to the geography here
while
for
they're
a second.
sleeping.
So even though you think it, at first I thought as well that I thought the same thing, that they were walking across half the continent because, they're Harfoots. They seem like hobbits. They should be in the Shire, right?
Mhm.
Actually, so when we first see them, before they migrate, when we first see them, they start out in Rovanion, which is nowhere close to the Shire. It's actually pretty close to Mordor. It's just north of it, or what will become Mordor. So back to our USA analogy. If Arondir and the humans and everybody in the Southlands, where Sauron is eventually going to set up camp, if we think of what will become Mordor, the Southlands is Florida, then where the Harfoots start out is basically Georgia. They're just above that on the map. And as they migrate down, they're actually migrating towards the Southlanders. So as they're going to migrate in
Southwest, right?
Yeah, because
yes,
they're looking for it to get warmer.
yeah, they're marching towards. They appear to be marching towards at least Athelion.
Okay.
Yo, that's crazy. It's like they're gonna do an end of season meetup in order to be the plot hook for season 2.
Dang.
No, I don't think it's gonna happen in season 1.
What?
You don't think they're gonna meet at season 1 at all?
The Harfoots, no, I don't think so. We'll see.
I think the stranger is gonna look over a cliff, and there's gonna be all the armies about to fight off towards Mordor, and he's just gonna stare, and then it's gonna cut to black and say, "Come back, season 2."
The stranger will return.
Oh my goodness!
Now, little fun fact here. Our first scene with the Harfoots, you know how that scene starts out? It starts out with the 2 hunters as they're
Yeah.
walking over the hill. You know the
Big
conversation they're
moose.
having? The one guy with what seems to just be a throwaway line. One guy says, "Something's wrong here. Nothing to hunt. Wolves in every thicket. Don't you think it's the least bit strange?" Not only will that obviously come back into play when the humans and Ostirith can't find anything for food when they're hunting. You know how the other hunter responds? Any guesses? He says, "World strange," which is basically the Tolkien version of life is strange.
Yeah, it just seemed to imply that there's, darkness spreading. Not that there are 3 shape-shifting werewolves hunting things down. But
Well, this would be more
to your
the
credit,
poison that's spreading, that's poisoning the cows and the grass and all that stuff.
all
That's
the
why there's
black
nothing
stuff.
to hunt.
Yeah. And like in the intro with the pebbles, it's a little swirly black thing. But I was gonna say, to your credit, like there are shapeshifters in the universe of Middle Earth. So
Yes, there are.
it's a possibility. We'll see.
So, on the Harfoots, like them, love them, hate them, what?
So when the first trailer came out, I saw the first trailer and not any of the other trailers, I don't think. But it was somewhat Harfoot centered. There was Galadriel, of course, but like they showed a lot of the Harfoots, and I was like, come on, you serious? They're really going back to like halfling stuff like the Lord of the Rings did, which the Lord of the Rings did it perfectly. and The Hobbit tried it. And for the record, in my opinion, The Hobbit, the book, is Tolkien's best work.
Easily.
It might be to this day my favorite book of all time. Bilbo Baggins
It's high
might
praise.
be my favorite literature character of all time. Just a throwaway line. But the Hobbit movies, they did Bilbo Baggins terribly. Martin Freeman gave it his all, and I think he was perfectly cast, and I think he was just phenomenal. But his character, the way his character was written, was just awful. It was just terrible, especially in the third one. It was really just sad to see it go and turn into this big Lord of the Rings ripoff CGI crap fest. And then this one comes out, and I'm like, we're really going back to halflings. Like, haven't we had enough? Like, why can't Galadriel be the main character of this series? And now that it's come out, now that we're 5 episodes in, my thoughts have the show has flipped my thoughts on its head. And the Harfoot plotline is far and away my favorite of the four. I love it. And it doesn't have there's a lot of mystery surrounding it with the stranger character. But above all, I enjoy hanging out with these characters more than I do any of the others. They're just so endearing. They really do get that, not really innocence, but like just the simpleness of like the Shire from Lord of the Rings, from the first half an hour of Fellowship of the Ring.
Everyday
And there's
life.
just yeah, and there's just a purity to it, and they're unsoiled by the outside world, partly because, they stay away from it. But then there's also the tension. It's not like super, end of the world stakes tension, but there's, Nori wants to explore, and then there's, her parents and Sadak, I think is his name, that are telling her to avoid that stuff. And then it's just that childhood, coming of age style stuff. And then she meets the character, as Will said, and then the stranger, as Will said. And then there's this thought of, is there destiny? Is there fate in the world? And was this placed in my hands? Am I supposed to help this person? And there's just a lot of potential there. And it's just so much fun watching these characters do what they do. And I adore the plotline.
And I think ultimately the most important thing is the Harfoots, they remind us why what all these characters are fighting for matters.
Yeah, exactly. And that really is the point of Lord of the Rings. That's the point of, Frodo and Sam and Merry and Pippin in those books and in those movies. It could be done anywhere with any characters and any civilization, really, but it gives it just another push when it's the hobbits, given what Gandalf and Galadriel say in those movies about them and how they prove Gandalf and Galadriel's statements right in those movies. It's done really, really well. And I was worried that they were just going to do that just to do that because Lord of the Rings did that. And they haven't connected anything yet. So we'll see. But so far they're doing it really well. Just this separate thing. I like it. What are
I
your thoughts, Will?
agree in full. They are the most heartfelt, they are the most endearing. There is a simplicity to them, but that in no way makes them one-dimensional.
Yes.
They capitalize on every line. They capitalize on they have the dwarven respect for the land, but just above ground. And they have their wariness, but they're friendly towards one another. They aren't there to put down each other. They really are this group thinking mentality. And even those who've passed along or passed away, they still love to hold them near and dear. When they're traveling through the Great Migration, we see the carts that have been left behind by people who have been left behind or fell behind during the migration and passed away. And I thought it was a really, really, really touching moment during the migration ceremony where they recall everyone who they'd lost. When you learn why Poppy Proudfellow is always alone and why we weren't introduced to any other parents or brothers and sisters, and that's because she's been orphaned because everybody else died in the landslide, and that's what they say. And it has a zoom in on the faces. We know that her dad, or Nori's dad, lost someone named Rose. I'm pretty sure it would be his first wife.
And Nora's mom.
Nori's mom. Okay, then yeah,
Yeah.
so his first wife is lost, and they have the singing ceremonies, but they don't overdo any of that singing stuff. You have Poppy singing as they go along. You have the
Loved her
snail
song.
collecting.
Really cool.
Oh, yes, the Poppy Proudfellow song, best part of the show so far, as
Yeah.
as it shows where they're going. It gives you different outlines.
Yep.
But Warren, just as you're saying, that gives you so much.
Crossfades on the map, and then
Mhm.
they montage and without dialogue.
Mm-hmm.
It's really cool.
Mm-hmm. And the strangers there pushing it along the entire time, which allows the dad to take time off his foot, and what has become like what was seen as like this bad omen is just circumstance. But that is back to one of those old proverbs of what is luck or what is chance, and I don't believe in all that. If you don't know what I'm talking about, I can explain it to you guys some other time. But it's just that circumstance has arisen, and you have to take it for what it is. And that's what they do. And in the circumstances that are at hand, Nori sees her destiny, and she's willing to help this stranger even to the detriment of her own family. But what is initially counterintuitive becomes productive. But it's because they latch onto each other, and it's because they show kindness to one another that goodness comes out. But then that leads over into the stranger's arc of how he doesn't really know who or what he is or how or why he does things. He what does he say? He calls himself Peril, I believe. He's like Peril when they're talking about all the dangers that are ahead on the migration, or when Nori's talking about the dangers on the migration, and he laughs along, and she reinforces like, "You're not Peril, you're not dangerous." But then a little while later, he hurts her, or at least she gets wrapped up in his healing magic. And the stranger, I really have no idea what to think about him. I am keeping a very open mind about him as a character. I like what they've done so far of this person who seems uncomfortable in his own body, yet very powerful, with intuition in certain senses, but a one-tracked mind. But he's also willing to sacrifice because he recognizes goodness in other people. If this character turns evil, I could see it. If this character turns Gandalf, I could also see that. I just hope they develop him more and more and more to the point that we're given a fully fleshed out character who I can root for or root against, no matter what.
What do you think of Nori's relationship with the stranger and how she's developing her character through him? You fan of that, or
I am. I am. I think it's a cliffhanger in episode 5 where we don't know how that's going to resolve because of his face and the elements that are bending to his emotions and Nori running away in fear, but how he's also just protected him. But I do think she just sees, I think she thinks that she has more power over the stranger than she really does. Like she's like, oh, because I have found him and I've nurtured him, he is in some way indebted to us. I think she thinks that she has power over the stranger that she doesn't have, in that she has helped him. And usually, as the Harfoots are concerned, when we help each other, they help us. And so she is expecting Harfoot tendencies from a stranger based on her good nature. And whether or not that turns out to be true or how this stranger thinks is yet to be seen. But so far, it does appear as though he acts in that way. And I do think it builds both of their characters up. They even tag along Poppy for a bit of fun in there as well. I don't think it hinders either character's growth. I think it adds to it. Yeah, I think it's well done.
So one of the things that I think is really cool with the stranger, and they do this in a different way with Adar, who I guess we'll talk about later. These two characters, I think, are kind of the two biggest characters in the show. They're really kind of challenging who are the good guys. And that's something that Lord of the Rings films didn't really ever explore. It was just, here are your good guys, here are your bad guys. And in this, I think it's really cool how some of the characters are throwing some doubt in there as to, who's actually doing what's best or doing what's right or doing what helps people or what they should be doing. And
I think Numenor would be a better example of that than Adar, because it's pretty clear that Adar is evil. Even if he's going to challenge Sauron in some way, he's not going to make it.
we'll talk about Adar later, but
We will.
Numenor's a good example as well.
Yeah. But I agree with your point fully. Good point.
Also for the stranger watch, talking about if he's good or bad, we don't know yet, but it's a bit concerning when you know how he keeps echoing what Nori says, trying to like understand what the words mean. And Marigold says, "It won't get any easier in the dark. Keep moving." The stranger echoes, "Easier in the dark." A little concerning.
Yeah,
We'll
but
see.
then he looks up at the sky, right? And kind of that, I don't know what's going on, because he also stargazes from time to time, just looking at them stars.
Just a lonely stargazer. Maybe he's just been an astronomer this whole time.
Yeah, he had to get real up close and personal with the stars to figure out where they were. That's why he came crashing back down to Earth. He's just up there observing. We ready to talk about the next one, or what you guys thinking? Anything else to add to the Harfoots and the Strangers?
Not all who wander are lost.
Nope.
Great production design, great cinematography, especially. I think it's shot all outdoors, or at least it seems to be. Really good lighting. I think all the technical aspects there are the best, just with the crunching in the grass, and it feels lived in more so than any of the others. Partly because it's the easiest. They just, they go to the forest and make their little huts. But like the huts are just so well designed. Really well done stuff.
So one last note about the Harfoots. When they're wandering through the marshes as they're migrating down south and slightly west, it's a little unclear because the maps between the second and third age are a little different. But it seems like the gray marshes that they're going through, they appear to be in pretty much the exact same place as the dead marshes that Frodo and Sam and Gollum go through. So fun little similarity in the landscape there.
Okay. So about halfway through the first episode, we meet Elrond. The first thing he does pretty much is talk to Galadriel, who just returned home from her expedition of hunting and arrogance. And he goes to her as a friend, supposedly, which he is, and he does, and convinces Galadriel to accept Gil-galad's offer to allow her and her party to sail to Valinor. And he converses with her for a little bit, and he is successful, and Galadriel goes, and at the end of the episode, episode 1, we learn that he was in collaboration with Gil-galad to get Galadriel to go away. And he wasn't doing this out of spite or out of resentment, but he was just doing it because Gil-galad believed that if she stayed, she would just perpetuate a spirit of conflict that wasn't needed because they don't believe the darkness is there anymore. After this, Elrond is introduced to Lord Celebrimbor, and he is a famous elven smith, and he goes down to Celebrimbor's homeland, and they are going to first make a big furnace so they can harness some sort of power into something. Maybe it's a ring. In order to do this, they go to Khazad-dûm, which is a city in Moria. Elrond is let in, Celebrimbor is rejected because Elrond is a friend and Celebrimbor is just an elf to them. And yeah, shut up, Will. Elrond is, he is a friend in this. He is done fairly well, I think. He has his flaws, as do all the characters except for Nori. But Elrond is let in reluctantly. In order to stay in, he challenges Durin to a rock hammering contest, which he loses. But because him and Durin are such good friends, Durin allows him to have dinner. He stays there for quite some time and eventually discovers that the dwarves are Durin specifically, and a couple of his, comrades are hiding something. And Elrond goes to investigate further, finds out that they are mining mithril, which is the near indestructible material that we learn is made from like the essence or the shattered broke like something from the Silmarils.
At least that's what Gil-galad is claiming.
That's what he says. Yes. It's just a very, very precious metal that is only found in the deep mines of Moria, and the dwarves are mining for it illegally against Durin's father's wishes, who is Durin's father is the king of Khazad-dûm. And I think
Also named Durin.
Also Moria. Yeah, he's also Durin.
Durin the third.
Prince Durin is Durin the fourth. Yes.
Yeah. So real quickly.
Yeah.
Quick geography.
Go for it.
So
Where is
Elrond
Moria
starts
in
up
the
in
United
Lindon.
States?
When he goes down to meet Lord Celebrimbor and Celebrimbor's explaining his plan and everything, they're in a region, which I'm gonna call Missouri-ish. And they go down to Moria, which is, we'll say Kentucky. Kind of right in the middle of Middle Earth.
Okay. So after what?
It just had that very cool anyway kind of vibe to it. I'm just not gonna lie.
No.
It's found it very, very funny.
I was just thinking, like Kentucky. Yeah, Kentucky makes sense. Okay, yeah, sure. If Florida is Mordor, it feels a little closer. Yeah, I don't know.
Well, the map
Because the Misty
doesn't
Mountains kind of cut it off.
the map
so
doesn't
sure.
quite work because I'm counting the part that's under the sea as part of the US.
Yeah.
And then also Middle Earth, like it
Yeah.
angles out to the northwest. So it's tough to completely make a good analogy.
Well,
but
hey, they say,
yeah.
you know, they say California is going to be underwater in the next 50 years. So
There you go.
there
Could
you
have used
go.
the map of another continent, but I don't know. Europe, maybe the one Tolkien modeled it after.
That's too easy.
Okay.
The Balkans are Mordor confirmed. But so Durin is pretty upset and believes that Elrond went there to discover Mithril because the elves had suspected something that the dwarves were doing, and now they found it out, and now he was going to tell all of his elf friends about this discovery. And Elrond assures him that he was just there because of the furnace they're going to make, and he discovered this purely on accident, and he swears to Durin that he won't tell anyone else of his discovery. When he leaves Khazad-dûm and goes back to report to Gil-galad and Celebrimbor, it's a long one, of his findings, he discovers that he was sent there on a reconnaissance mission, essentially, to discover what the dwarves were doing and if they were, you know, uncovering this Silmaril residue, which they are. He was unaware of this and feels somewhat led astray, but he keeps his oath to Durin and wasn't going to reveal the true purpose of his mission and assures Durin that he was unaware of it. Durin, Elrond, Celebrimbor, and Gil-galad have a little dinner, and then when Durin is ready to depart, Elrond comes clean to him and says that, according to Gil-galad, this mithril is the only thing that can save them from the rot that is incoming. And does he ask to keep mining it with him, or does he ask for access to it? I don't really remember.
So he basically explains to Durin that they're either going to have to leave Middle Earth or stay and die if they don't have
Yes.
Mithril. And then
The elves will.
he's like, our fate's in your hands, basically.
Yes.
And then
Which is the
Durin's like,
best part of that. Yeah, yeah,
my
yeah.
hands?
Uh-huh.
No, he says, say that again.
Yep.
Whose hands?
And that's where we leave off with them.
So, yeah, a couple things. First of all, I will say Elrond is definitely my favorite character for a lot of reasons. I love some of his dialogue, and he's a very interesting character. He's somewhat conflicted. He's a very smart character in some ways, but then some stuff goes over his head in other ways. I will say, and maybe stuff just hasn't been explained very well, or maybe it just was edited in a confusing manner. But High King Gil-galad and Celebrimbor, their plan with the Mithril, A, it doesn't really make sense. B, it's never really explained.
Yeah.
And how, yeah, that part.
Yeah,
Not
that's
really
why I'm
sure what their
confused.
plan
And like,
is.
there's definitely more that's gonna come. There was one shot of a Balrog facing down the one of the king elves from the first age. Elves, not elves.
I think supposedly it's I forget what his name is, but supposedly they couldn't say his name because they don't have the rights to it or something. I don't know. But I think it was a
the
pretty
elf
famous
or
elf.
the
The
Balrog.
elf.
Okay, they don't have the rights to it.
I think it was
That's
something from the Silmarillion. I don't remember.
strange. Okay, well, it's definitely something from the Silmarillion, yes. But so essentially, the elves will wither away without Mithril to protect them from the oncoming darkness. And this plotline overall is kind of supposedly the pivotal point of the series. It's Celebrimbor and Elrond making the Rings of Power. And yet, I don't feel like this one's really going anywhere. I really like Durin as a character. I enjoy him and his wife and, you know, everything in Moria. You know, they're funny. They have good dialogue. They're lighthearted. They're they're just, you know, they're goofy little individuals, and I like them. I'm gonna be honest, I am not sold on Elrond at all yet.
Okay.
I think I don't want to criticize this too much, but aside from being what looks like a foot shorter than Kate Blanchett, the actress who plays Galadriel is killing it. Like, she is on fire. I am not totally sold on her character writing so far, but like, she just embodies Galadriel and she is doing a phenomenal job. She has every mannerism down. She looks the part so well. Like, in the first episode, they did an extreme close up on her eyes,
Yeah.
very reminiscent of the extreme close ups of Kate Blanchett's eyes from Fellowship, and it looked exactly alike. Like
When she's talking to the
you
king.
can't tell
Yeah.
the difference. It's awesome. And Elrond doesn't look like Hugo Weaving at all, which I can excuse. I can excuse that. It's okay.
Let's be honest. How many
But
people really look like Hugo Weaving?
yeah, yeah. But how many people look like Kate Blanchett and they found her?
That's true.
But he's giving a good performance. He's trying. This show is going to have to really push itself in order to make Elrond, because it's one thing to take the Galadriel character where she is right now and turn her into the Galadriel from Fellowship of the Ring. It's a whole different beast to take the Elrond's character they have right now and like harden him over the next 5 seasons into the Elrond he is in Fellowship of the Ring, because he's totally different. He's going to have to be put through the ringer with some betrayals and trials and war that's coming, and just the political grossness of the elves and the dwarves that's going to have to take place in order to make him this. He's not a condescending character in Fellowship, but he is a hardened character in Fellowship, especially like not just in Fellowship. In the first couple minutes, the Battle of Dagorlad, when he's just fighting there and he's just, commanding all the elves, the legions of elves. And then he has to go into Mount Doom and talk to Isildur. I don't see this actor right now being able to yell at Isildur the way he does, that the way that Hugo Weaving is able to in Fellowship. I would love it if they're able to go the route of that, but like the way all the other stories are lining up, they're trying to be very PG-13, very safe, very, light succeeding storylines. And Elrond's going to have to be somewhat of an inverse of that in order to really take him where he needs to go. So Elrond is my only complaint with the storyline. I love Durin. He's awesome.
Elrond is very different from Fellowship of the Ring Elrond right now. Yes. Which I think could be seen as exciting because his journey is so far to go.
It could
We'll
be.
see.
If I had a lot more faith in this show, I would be pumped. But I'm worried above all, I think.
I'm probably not going to add a whole lot here because Carter and I are sharing the exact same brain cells on everything.
Yeah, I don't hate this show
like-
as much as Will, guys. I don't hate this show as much.
Well, I said it before. I think I'm probably the one who likes the show the least. We'll get into
Sure.
ratings at the end of the season.
In the entire world.
Or
Yep.
of the three of us, but also in the entire world. And I said this before to you guys. I want to like this show. I really, really do. I have done my time watching the Lord of the Rings films 3-4 times each.
Okay,
I'm
that
done
doesn't
with
count.
them.
That's it?
Yeah, I think 3-4 times each.
Pathetic.
But I'm done. I can quote most of them. I know exactly what happens. I don't get that rush anymore.
Mhm.
They're still incredible. I love the scenery and everything like that. I want to love these shows as much as I love that show. Or as much as I love those movies. And I really do hope they bring Elrond around, toughen him up a bit, build him into this somber, stoic, steadfast character who's capable of, loving on people in a way that he knows how to love, while still having a firm grasp of the reality of the situation. Like I love in the Lord of the Rings movies where the way Elrond loves his daughter is by being honest with her, right? Of just saying, listen, you stay, you die. And in this,
Yeah.
Elrond is just a very, oh man, I ran away from the political meeting again because I was reading and writing poetry in the woods. And I just thought to myself, really? And his line to Galadriel, it's like, then you'll be what you've always been, my friend.
Yeah, that one was a bit dicey.
Stupid line.
I will say, I think our first glimpse of what you're talking about with Elrond might be his conversation with Galadriel, where, and I love that it's not just like a conversation where clearly one side's always right. There's so many of these conversations where both sides hold weight and both sides are at least somewhat right. But Galadriel's talking about how like she needs to go find Sauron, she needs to go on her mission. Like nobody believes her, she needs to keep going on this. And Elrond basically just straight up tells her like, how many more people do you have to get killed to appease your guilty conscience? It's basically the gist of what he's saying, and just carries so much weight in such a harsh but truthful way to put it that really speaks to her. Also, I think part of what's starting to make Elrond who he becomes is when we first meet Elrond, they were talking about Elrond like not being allowed back in whatever meeting it was. I think that's something that really pushes his ambition, because he's not an elf lord. He's like a lower class than a lot of these characters, and that really pushes his ambition to do all these things on top of everything his father did that he'll talk about later, and trying to live up to that name. Also, Carter.
Yes.
So I'm going to build the world's tallest skyscraper. Going to be taller than any skyscraper ever built.
Oh
And
yeah.
oh yeah, I'm going to need it done by March.
Will do.
Oh, our guy Celebrimbor. It's a little, I mean, not concerning at all when he says true creation requires sacrifice.
Hmm. And the seeds are planted, they somewhat. They could give Elrond the character arc he needs. It's just about follow through.
So one thing that's becoming clearer and clearer, and is now extremely clear,
Hmm.
is that High King Gilgalad and Celebrimbor are both from the start manipulating Elrond the entire time. And one of the things that was weird to me was when Gilgalad is talking to Elrond, and he's trying to get Elrond to like break his vow and tell him about Mithril, and he basically walks through like everything that Mithril is and like where it is and what they need it for, and he's like, okay, but like, he already knows everything that Elrond knows basically, and make it such a big deal that Elrond breaks his vow. That part I didn't quite buy.
I agree with you on that point as well. Of just wait a second, this guy knows exactly what it is already. Then what's with all this sneaking around? Why do they need to manipulate someone to find out something that's already known? Is it for the sake of just aha, we did know, or
Maybe.
And if you want another fishy Celebrimbor moment, when Elrond's standing at the window, Celebrimbor, he like remembers some memory of Elrond's father like standing there saying something similar, and he's like, you know what? I hadn't remembered that until now. Isn't that odd? I was like, yes, it is.
every single Celebrimbor moment is a fishy Celebrimbor moment?
Well, he's a
He's a
character.
fishy guy.
He's a
Yeah.
character very driven by, would you say, ambition, greed, pride? He wants to be. He's probably a little too driven to outdo Feanor.
I think he wants to be the very best, like no one ever was.
Yeah.
And in that, he's willing to sacrifice and betray his way to get there. I don't know. I don't see them as really developing him more than that. You guys?
Not really.
Yeah.
So in the, I believe in the book lore, I believe Celebrimbor was the guy who Sauron appeared to as Anatar. If I'm remembering this correctly. We'll talk about that more later. But basically, Celebrimbor is very easy to manipulate because he's so ambitious. Now, one thing that I thought it was kind of cool, where Durin is super angry at his father and calls him the goat, but not as a compliment. And then Elrond like basically talks him down and goes through the whole story about his father and how like he just wishes he had more time with him, and basically tells Durin not to waste the whatever time he has left with his dad. I thought that was a really sweet moment between the two of them. Elrond and Durin, I love the two of them so much.
They got good interactions when it's just them. I like them.
Yeah, Durin is. I can totally see a dwarf holding a grudge because his elf buddy wasn't there at his wedding or when his kids are born for 20 years.
There could be no trust between hammer and rock. In the end, one must surely break.
And the hammer broke. But I do love how serious they can get too, where it's like put your hand on the mountain and swear to me that not a word of this will breathe, or like you won't breathe a word of this and all that stuff. I think they have some tender moments. It's a well thought out friendship that really helps to build each other up, I think. And I enjoy viewing their friendship together. And I do think that Durin is a very lovable character. I think his wife even more so. I love the like, oh yeah, the tree. You mean that thing he planted and is taking care of forever? And which Owen goes like, oh, so I guess I'm a little forgiven. And then you have her just saying, put the squabbling away. You're friends. He's here now. Get over yourselves and just have a good one and work together for the greater good. The kids are funny as well. And the chant that comes into play a little later. Let's see. Oh, the table scene was also
Great.
pretty funny. It's like, oh, where'd you get this stone? It's from the heart of a mountain. We use it in only the most religious of ceremonies to honor our dead. And as the elves are taking it away, because what is it? Gilgalad promises it to him to return it to them as a, what are they called? Goodwill offerings, I guess. He just laughs And Elrond goes, "Oh, so you made the whole thing up?" And Twitch just stirred says, "Yep, 100%."
Issa wanted a new table.
Exactly. It's such a funny line because I believe him entirely. I believe that that's what that character would say in that situation. Here's this incredibly tense negotiation between two parties who have a lot of dirt between each other. And what does he do? He finds a way to have a funny joke and to get his wife a brand new table. It's like, where'd this come from? Oh, Gilgalad sent it over. As a goodwill offering towards you, honey. It's so funny, man.
Also, back to what you're saying with the tree, Elrond had another great line there where Disa was saying that like people thought Durin was a fool for trying to raise a tree so far down where it's so dark. And Elrond said, "Where there is love, it is never truly dark. How could it not grow in a home like yours?" Phenomenal.
But every single time he does that, it then cuts to Durin's just angry face of, "You're just trying to stay here for an extra minute because you think it'll make me feel sorry for you." But then it works because that's how the dwarves work. And it's totally endearing and totally earned in it as well.
Absolutely no staying for dinner.
Oh, so you're staying for dinner? Perfect.
I think some of the Dwarven insults are just phenomenal. Like you wouldn't remember your own face if you were gazing in a mirror. You must have some sandstone in your granite.
Oh, but also how Durin's characterized as being a caring person as well. How he's the prince, right? He's next in line. But what does he do when the mine collapses? He runs in there immediately without hesitation. And he looks at Elrond as if, "You're not going to hold me back. I'm going in there to save," was it? I think he said there's 4 dwarves or 6 dwarves in there.
Yeah, 4.
And there's 4 dwarves, and he goes in there and he doesn't sleep. He doesn't rest until all of them have been alive. And then when you find out that they're all alive, there's the story of, was it Elrond says that, "Oh, well, actually there were 3 mountain trolls, and I had to save Durin from all 3 of them." But then even the story between, what's his wife's name? Disa, of how Disa and Durin met, of just like, "And then I noticed he was coming to my mining line every day." It was just so sweet, and it's so fun and heartfelt and warm. And it contrasts them, like they bring warmth and heart and life to the mines, which has been, for at least the Lord of the Rings series, something that's very dark and sad and gloomy and filled with evil. Just, I loved it, except for how CG it is sometimes.
There was also, I really like the scene with Disa when she was like singing to the mountain, the really haunting song. That was really cool.
That was good.
What was that for? Do they tell us? Because I completely thought it was a funeral for the 4 dwarves until...
That's what I assumed at first.
She said it was a plea to the mountain to release them unharmed.
Okay.
I think Moria has the best CGI in the entire show, honestly. I think it helps because it's a little bit darker. They're not trying to go for this ethereal, sunlit world of Numenor or anything. But I quite like the CGI in Moria. I think it's done well.
I didn't like the one establishing shot at the very beginning.
Outside the mountain?
No, when they just get in and they're looking down through all like the intricate staircases and stuff like that, right after they pass through the door. I thought that one looked a little hokey. I don't know. I just want like a miniature or something. I don't know. I'm sorry, I'm such a Debbie Downer, man.
All right, well, let's move on to your favorite plot.
No!
Your absolute favorite.
I don't want to talk
Arondir and the
Arondir.
Southlanders.
I hate this one.
Let's do it.
2 out of 10.
All right, so our final plot thread, we have Arondir and the Southlanders. We start out, we meet Arondir, who's this elf soldier stationed at Ostirith, which is like a watchtower to watch the Southlanders, who, as we will learn later, their ancestors sided with Morgoth in the war, and so the elves are very skeptical of them. Arondir later says this line to Rowan: "The past is always with it, whether we like it or not." And so there's always that tension between the humans and the elves. They were on opposite sides in the war, even though the humans resent them for that because these humans weren't alive then. That was like hundreds of years ago, and their ancestors way back, and the elves still hold it against them, even though they didn't commit any of those. So that's something that's very present here. Even in this first scene, where Arondir enters this tavern, and Rowan, who's pretty drunk and very angry, goes up and starts insulting Arondir and the elves. And Waldrick is about to go with the uppercut to knock him out. He's like, enough of this. We don't want any trouble with the elves. Like, just gonna, knock out this troublemaker. But I thought it was so well done. It reminded me a lot of. Have you guys seen Ted Lasso?
Reminded you of Ted Lasso.
In this regard, in that the beginning of Ted Lasso, the very first episode, how we meet him, and I don't remember all the details, but basically when you meet him, there are like 3 or 4 different things that happen in the first couple scenes with him, where people are either like really disrespectful or like openly antagonistic towards him, where anybody would get angry or retaliate or be passive aggressive or whatever, and he just keeps smiling, moving on, and like he doesn't get hung up on that at all. But Arondir in this,
He doesn't smile too much.
no, he doesn't. But right before Waldreg is about to knock this guy out, he just casual flick of the wrist, blocks the punch, and he's like, "No, we're not gonna answer its violence." I thought it was a very interesting way to introduce him. But anyways, Arondir ends up traveling to this other town, and again, remember, the Southlands are like Florida. So Arondir and Bronwyn, this guy brings in a very disturbingly diseased cow, and they're like, "Where did it come from?" And he's like, "Oh, somewhere in the east." So then they travel to this town Hordern, which is further east. And when they get there, they arrive, they discover that the town's been burned, everyone is gone. And as they investigate, they find this giant tunnel underneath one of the buildings. And so Arondir goes down, follows the tunnel. Bronwyn runs back to Tir Harad, which is her town, to go warn everyone. And so when Bronwyn goes back to Tir Harad, nobody believes her, but then an orc breaks through and like her and Theo kill the orc. And then everyone believes them, and then they go off towards Ostirith, the watchtower. Then Arondir had followed the tunnel, ultimately gets captured by an orc. And so Arondir and his captain Revion and his fellow soldier Medor are all chained up, and the orcs are making them dig this tunnel for them. Them and a bunch of humans, presumably the inhabitants of this other town that was destroyed. And so they're digging this giant tunnel for the orcs, which, by the way, pretty brilliant military strategy here. Because not only does it allow the orcs to go about unseen around all these different lands, but also just from a military point of view, when can the orcs not walk above ground? When it's daylight. But if you have a tunnel, your orcs can go all over the place, even when it's daytime and the sun's out. So pretty clever strategy from potentially Sauron here, whoever's in charge of those decisions. They're making better military decisions than some of the other folks. So anyways, as these 3 elves are in captivity here, the captain Revion comes up with this plan. They're going to wait for the moment to strike. Well, they're going to scout the landscape, and they're going to wait for the moment to strike and try to escape, to warn their fellow elves and bring reinforcements to come back and save them. But then basically, as they're digging, they run into a tree. And for the elves, this is a big deal because they have, like, I don't know exactly what, but they have some sort of reverence for a lot of nature, but especially trees. Like in Linden, you had the beautiful carvings of the dead soldiers into the living trees. A lot of stuff with elves and trees. But ultimately, the elves really don't want to cut down this tree, but it's in their way for this tunnel. And so the orcs kind of need them to cut down the tree. And so the elves refuse. And this orc comes in with the bottle of water, and he ends up just murdering Medor, the fellow soldier. And then they're about to kill the captain too. And Arondir's like, "Okay, I'll do it before this gets any worse. I don't want to, but I'll do it anyways." That also affords the perfect opportunity to scout their surroundings. And he's like, "Oh, there's nobody here. It's just a waste pit. We could escape this. Easy peasy." So then when they do get the chance, finally, some really cool choreography in this fight scene with the orcs. But Arondir leaping off the chain to slice down the canopy to bring it down. Quite a cool move. There's a warg that I know is the topic of a lot of discussion online. Some people loved it, some people hated it. But ultimately, the scene ends with the captain. He finally escapes, gets over the ridge, and you're like, "Oh, he's gonna escape. We've building up this entire episode how they're gonna escape." And then Arondir climbs the hill, and what does he see? He sees the captain slowly turn around, arrow in his chest. Turns out they were archers he did not see, and just a brutally heartbreaking way to end that escape attempt. So then he's recaptured, and his life goes on.
Yeah,
Revion's does not.
When Arondir's friend died, I could care less. When the captain died, it was well done, actually. I liked the arrow reveal. That was some good. It was just a good
It
reveal.
really felt like he could have escaped and fit the story.
It did, yeah.
So
much
it
more
really
then they're passing the bottle around, and it's like, okay, well, obviously something's gonna happen, and then he kills him. It's like, oh, okay, but you really did think the captain was gonna get away, and then he looks up, and then he's just standing there.
He just falls backwards,
Well done.
and then the other one hits him too.
Yeah,
Yes.
And then later on, we learned that elves can catch arrows. So that was really cool too.
No, just
Well,
a
he didn't
Rondir.
expect it. He was just booking it.
Yeah.
You know?
So you mean like when a Rondir catches the one that's flying behind him and he turns and catches it?
Yeah.
Expectedly?
Yeah. But this guy isn't a
Exactly.
Rondir. He probably doesn't have those skills.
No, yeah,
just
he's a
been sitting with him.
captain. He's above him.
Yeah. Yeah. You know how it is.
Sorry, guys.
No, but
My bad.
I think that really does make it that much more heartbreaking because we thought he would escape. So it's unexpected for us and the character, and it helps us feel more for the scene.
Yeah, it was good. Why was the design of the warg such a hot topic online? Is it just because people on the internet are stupid?
No, so
or-
the way they chose to, and this was obviously a design choice. It doesn't
Mhm.
look like they could have made it look more like a wolf, but they chose to go
Okay.
with more of like the giant eyes, and so it's just kind of a style choice that some people like, some people didn't. I think for the warg.
Okay,
What did you think?
thought it looked like a warg,
Not
It
a
was-
wargle.
not a
Yeah,
wargle.
dude. Y'all got to read Ranger's Apprentice. Great show. Or great
Great
book
series.
series.
Yes.
Yeah. Sorry.
Wait, who are the wargles in Ranger's Apprentice?
They are Morgorath's denizens, essentially,
Oh,
in book 1, 2, and nope, just 1 and 2.
yeah. Okay. Okay, so after Arondir is recaptured, we meet this new character, Adar. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that just means father.
In what
Essentially-
language?
I think it's in Elvish. I don't remember. But basically the orcs are calling him father,
Hmm.
which could have some significance. We'll talk about that a little later. But Adar
Warren, you are
comes in-
correct on that.
Ah, thank you.
Good job.
So Adar comes in, and surprisingly touching scene where he's basically putting a wounded orc down, and you can just tell how much it hurts him emotionally, which is kind of off-putting because we've never seen anyone even remotely feel empathy or anything for an orc, really. So this was kind of cool new territory. But eventually Adar starts speaking to Arondir, and he's speaking to him in Elvish, which throws Arondir off as well. And Adar, like, he knows his station, he knows he's a soldier, and he asks him where he's from. And so Arondir tells him this place, Beleriand, and Adar had been there and like knew what plants grew there and everything. And so Arondir's very off-put and confused by this. For a little geography lesson here. So this place they're talking about, Beleriand, it's part of the continent of Middle-earth that got destroyed in the war with Morgoth. So if you want to think about it like this, part of the continent in the war with Morgoth just basically got destroyed and like sunk into the sea. If we're thinking about it in terms of the USA, it would kind of be like if Texas to California just got destroyed and fell into the Pacific Ocean. So it's in this area in the south of that region that Arondir is from that they're talking about. Cool geography there. But some of the things that Adar is talking about, I really loved it because it really makes us question our viewpoint and how we see a lot of things in the world here. Like Adar has this line, "You've been told many lies. Some run so deep even the rocks and roots now believe them. To untangle it all would all but require the creation of a new world. But that is something only the gods can do. And I am no god. At least, not yet." So obviously he's a bit concerning, but some cool doubt that's creeping in from some of the stuff he's saying. So ultimately, Adar lets Arondir go back to deliver a message, lets him go back to Ostirith, basically tell everyone there, surrender or die. And so he goes back, and while that's happening, Theo, Bronwyn's son, sneaks out of Ostirith because they've run out of food, and there's food in their village, but nobody's brave enough to go back because of the potential of orcs being there. And so they run back, him and Rowan, grab some food. Rowan abandons him, leaves him there. And Theo ultimately is snuck up on by an orc. And then he pulls out this cursed sword thing. And the orc's like, "Where did you get that? That's what we're looking for." And so that Theo like ends up running away and hiding, and all the orcs are looking for him. And then that's when this episode turns into a chapter of A Plague Tale Innocence. I'm assuming neither of you have played that game. Very fun game.
I know what it's about. I've seen a little bit of it, but
Yeah, reminded me so much of that game, because that game, basically what you're doing is you're sneaking around, trying to hide in the dark, and sneak around behind the walls, the tall brush. You have to walk behind the sentries so they don't see you, and like dodge all these sentries as they're walking. Anyways, Theo was playing A Plague Tale for a hot minute there. But anyways, Theo, he's about to escape. He's almost there. And then, he kind of takes one last look back. He's like, see, that wasn't so hard. And then immediately runs into an orc and gets sliced in the back of the leg and is about to die when Arondir shows up, saves his bacon. They start booking it back to Ostirith, chased by a horde of orcs. There's Will's favorite moment. Arondir grabs the arrow in slow motion, fires it back at the orc who shot it. And let me tell you, not a great day at the office for that orc archer. Can you imagine firing at the target you're supposed to be chasing and he catches your arrow and shoots you with it?
I can. It's actually a
Big
monk
oof.
ability in D&D, so just saying.
But okay, I know you were saying that one of your complaints or qualms was the orcs not firing at them when they're at the edge of the tree line. I'll put it to you like this: maybe, just maybe, the orc archers were thinking twice. It's like in basketball, like when Zion posterizes someone, and like a couple plays later, someone has a chance to contest his dunk, and he's like, I don't know if I want to be on a poster. I'm going to think about that one.
So here's a cool fact, though. What if, because he only has 2 hands, 3 people fire? Whoa! I'm sorry. I think I'm the greatest scriptwriter ever.
Maybe these orc archers didn't want to be in Arondir's highlight reel.
I detested that scene. So you're telling me you'd rather go back to your boss and not have the hilt of this legendary thing that he is on a warpath to find, and that's why everybody is going crazy in these areas? Or you're just gonna be like, man,
I'm just bringing up some alternative theories.
Well, your alternative theories are doo-doo. So I'm gonna stick with what I said, where that scene was awful entirely. Like they could have just have him sneak out. Just have him sneak out. Because the fact that they are so with the chase, you gain nothing other than if they had just snuck out anyway, right? You get this action sequence that does nothing, and he goes, they won't go out into the light. Crazy, but they haven't been.
My only qualm was that Arondir and Theo and Bronwyn weren't standing like 5 feet back, because the orcs' max range was like right where they were standing. If they were like 5 feet further back, it probably would have looked a little better.
I think that's also it too, was they were so close.
Yeah.
Like it was house driveway. That would have helped, Warren.
Well, actually, on rewatch, one of the things I noticed was the reason why Arondir wasn't, like getting ready to shoot them. He had run out of arrows, so he pulled out his sword and he was ready to like make his last stand there. And that's when the sunlight came out. This goes back to our theme of light and dark, though, because they're, in the darkest, like facing certain death as they're getting chased through the woods, and they go out, sunlight, they're saved. So it's kind of going back again to that theme of light and dark. Okay, so ultimately they make it back to Ostirith. Arondir delivers his message. About half-ish of the people choose to go and swear loyalty to Adar, and then about maybe half the people stay. I don't know. We didn't get a good glimpse of, I don't think, of what the percentiles of who stayed and who went was. But anyways, again, kind of a fascinating dialogue between Bronwyn and Waldreg when they're trying to convince people to stay or go. Bronwyn's like, stay here, we could fight, we have a chance to win, save our freedom, and if you stay with me and fight, we could survive this. And then Waldreg's like, come with me, we will survive this. And so he ends up getting a bunch of people to follow him. Although maybe that didn't prove so true for Rowan. rough fate for Rowan there.
I was really hoping they didn't cheapen that scene or something, or just go, oh, he has a change of heart at the end. I really like that he carried or followed through with it
off screen, but
yes, yeah, but
at least to the best of our knowledge, yes.
Heavily implied that he killed the kid. Also,
I thought it was quite hilarious that Waldreg, like probably a lot of us, well, okay, actually the way I phrased that might not make sense. I was about to say, like many of us, pledges loyalty to Sauron. Doesn't quite make sense. Like a lot of us thinks that this is Sauron. And he goes up and like pledges loyalty to Sauron. And then the way that Adar takes that, quite interesting. He's quite mad that he's called Sauron.
Yeah, which is some of the biggest proof that he isn't Sauron. Like, why else would he act that way?
Yes, I do not think he's Sauron.
Me neither.
I think it's most likely that...
Because Sauron can't take form yet, right?
No, he can.
No, oh, yeah, my bad.
And well, we'll get to that in a second. But for Adar, my best guess is at this moment is that he's an elf who was probably following Morgoth in the war.
Yep.
And also, it's also quite possible that Adar, maybe even very likely, that Adar was at least fairly responsible for the creation of a lot of these orcs, which would make sense why they call him father and why he's so invested in them. And that could even be like the very first scene with the cold, pun intended, open, where Galadriel is in the ice fortress, and there's like the creepy orc frozen in the wall, and they're talking about, they're like wondering what these guys were doing up here. That could have been Adar trying to make orcs. Who knows? Just throwing that out there. Okay, so our last thing here, episode 5, Arondir's teaching Theo some archery. Great guy to learn from. Clearly very skilled. But then Theo tells him about this cursed sword thing he has, and Arondir's like, wait, I've seen that before. And then peels back the vines, and there's this statue. It's a little unclear what it is still.
The key.
Yeah, some sort of key. And clearly they've seen it before, since it's in their watchtower. Which would make sense because one of Waldreg's ancestors had it, and whatever Morgoth was doing with it before. So that's a kind of question up in the air. What is the sword? What does it do? What is it there for? But anyways, kind of the last shot we get of them is this army of orcs and humans under loyalty to Adar marching on Ost-Tirith, and you see this giant army of torches starting to surround the place. So that's where we end off.
The only thing I really have to say about the Arondir stuff is that for me, Arondir, when he's not with the villagers, is definitely in my top 5 favorite characters on the show. Yeah, I love him. When he's by himself and stuff like that, or he's talking to the other elves, or he's just working together in the camp, I don't mind him at all. I enjoy his attitude. I enjoy his problem solving, even if it is a little hokey and cheesy. I really do like him. Arondir, when he's with all the villagers and there's that love interest stuff going on, bottom 3. I just don't get behind any of it. It feels very wooden and very forced, incredibly one-dimensional, and I'm not against him in every circumstance, just when he's trying to bond with humans.
Interesting. I like Arondir. He reminds me a lot of, well, after what you just said, maybe I won't say who he reminds me of, but he reminds me very much of someone that you both know.
Oriole?
No.
Oh, okay.
Just kind of as a general thing. I want to give a big shout out to Bear McCreary. Man, I love the music for this series so much. Some of the music is just phenomenal. And like some of the things are even kind of subtle. Like you have different refrains from Galadriel's theme playing in the background of a bunch of different scenes she's in. And some of this music is just really, really top tier.
It's there. It's serviceable. It's hard because it's
Wow.
like,
bro, me and Connor are the same person.
it's not bad at all. I like Galadriel's theme, but that's about it. I can hum like the 6-second section from her theme. The reason it's lackluster is because it's what it's going up against is Howard Shore's literal perfect score for all 3 of those movies, and the amount of leitmotifs he made for all 3 over the 9-10 hour span of those movies is just extraordinary. And there are people that say the score is the best part of Lord of the Rings, and I'm almost in that camp. I think it really is some of the best music ever written, and it's tough to even come close to. So it's there. Bear McCreary's good, big fan of him, but even the main titles, Howard Shore did those himself, and it's like it's there, you know. It's nothing memorable.
As Farazan says, sometimes the folly of youth is enough to make an old man weep. All right, well, let's just move on.
Sure.
Okay, so let's end with our burning questions that we have going forward.
What you got?
Let's start with, so in the cold open, we were talking about Galadriel. She says these orcs are meddling with powers of the unseen world, some dark sorcery of old, but what was their purpose? So what was their purpose? Is this Adar creating orcs? Is this some other nefarious work that Sauron was up to? We still don't really know for sure. So that could be potentially a big question going forward. I guess most of the burning questions revolve around who some of these characters are / who they will become. So what are you guys thinking about Theo,
I'm sorry, which person is that again?
Bronwyn's son, the boy? with
Oh,
the-
him?
yeah.
With the sword, yeah.
Super obnoxious. Really don't like his character at all.
I've seen some theories. Some people think he might become a Nazgul.
That'd be really cool.
It's potential.
But
He
again,
can become
I
one of the
currently find-
kings that gets a
Potentially.
ring.
Maybe.
Yeah, dude. Remember, this is Lord of the
Nah,
Rings.
'cause
Every strange person is a king somewhere
is gonna
somehow.
be. Yep, everyone's a Skywalker.
Yeah,
But
dude. They're all important characters.
I thought the kings
man.
were. I mean, it's possible. It's a stretch. I thought they were just like kings of places, and then the rings was what corrupted them. Because
Yes.
that's not a Nazgul sword that he has.
No.
No,
Well,
Well, he could have a
Probably
Nazgul
not.
mace too.
he's not the. If he's the Witch King, then the show does not know. what
no,
it's
he's
doing.
definitely not the Witch King.
No.
Some people think that. Okay, let's do the stranger and then we'll get to Halbrand last.
Okay,
So the stranger. Who do you guys think the stranger is?
I think he's
Radagast.
Sauron. As time goes on, I really don't
okay,
think he's Radagast.
I
I,
thought he
don't
was-
think he's a wizard at
okay,
all.
I know.
there
I
was-
just want him to be.
There was a second
Radagast.
where I thought he was Radagast when like the wolves were staring
fireflies?
him down. I thought he was gonna start like talking to the wolves, but then he like almost killed them. I was like, okay, it's not Radagast.
Ain't no way. Nope.
No, I know in my heart it's not. I just think it'd be really funny if they took Radagast the Brown and made him the star Maiar of the show or something like that. Just thought it'd be really funny. But nah, I'm kind of on the this is Sauron train.
Actually, no,
Yeah,
it's not Sauron.
really? I think it could
Why-
be because
why do you
like
think
the
why do you
cold
think it's Sauron?
fire.
No,
the
no,
cold
no.
fire.
I said he's Sauron as a joke because
No,
that's
I
that's
do,
the
though.
joke. Because he's 100% not Sauron. Because Sauron is already
Really?
there in Middle Earth. He's been there since the First Age, fighting along Morgoth.
Yeah, but
And the
isn't this
Morgoth
show
is
like
defeated, so he goes
based
into.
off of Lord of the Rings lore? Not
They're
100% verbatim off
they're
of the
saying it's
lore?
canon, and even if they weren't allowed to say it's canon, why would they change it that much? Why would they start with a cold open and say Sauron is out there, and then
Yeah, Sauron has
go
been there,
back on
but
that?
that doesn't mean that the stranger necessarily had to come from somewhere else. It could have been.
He was catapulted. Nah, so it's like for me, I don't think he's a good guy. Just I
think
think
he is.
the cold fire or whatever is
So there
one of the things surrounding it.
are definitely some hints that they at least seem to be implying that this could be Gandalf. Obviously, there's the obvious connection with the Harfoots, and some of the stuff he says could be Gandalf if they want to change the lore slightly. Personally, I think, and I'm very much hoping that this is just another Maiar that we haven't met yet. He's a wizard, kind of like Gandalf or Radagast.
That'd be
He's just
cool.
unnamed.
A blue one
Hopefully.
wouldn't impact Lord of the Rings at all, so it's not likely. But
Exactly. They got to
be
make
cool.
money off of the reveal, dude.
yeah, I have no clue. This is the one thing that's just throwing me for a loop. In all honesty, I have no idea who this is.
I could care less,
I-
honestly.
And yeah,
Just so long as he's nice to the Harfoots.
agreed.
Either
and like,
turn the
I-
Harfoots into evil people, or keep them as good people.
And not only that, I don't know who it is. It's that every time someone's like, it could be this, I'm like, nah, I really don't see that as that person, or I know it's not that person. Pretty much, like, not that I'm saying I know exactly what's happening, but like people say it's Sauron, people say it's Gandalf. No, it can't be one of them. You know,
Oh, yeah, it can.
Radagast,
For
not
the money,
really.
it can
Blue
be.
Wizard, I doubt it.
I think it could be Gandalf, but I hope it's not. But I
Yeah,
agree, I don't think
I'm
it's
with you
Sauron.
there.
Yeah,
Sauron would just be funny, man.
Let's
He
talk
just
about
nukes
Sauron.
all the Harfoots.
So Will already thought that the stranger is Sauron. Carter, who do you think Sauron is? Have we seen Sauron yet?
we
Or is
saw
he just
him.
moving behind in the shadows?
We saw him in silhouette in front of his army of orcs in
Yes.
the first 10
Or-
minutes. And
Yes, yeah.
And that was it. I don't think he showed up since.
We see
I don't
his
think he
face
will show
carved
up
into
still.
the mountain.
What?
We see his face carved into the mountain, holding the key at the end
Yeah.
of
That's
episode 5.
not
That's
Sauron.
not him incarnate.
Is it not?
Oh, it's Morgoth. right?
Is that?
Who knows?
I don't
I-
remember the statue well
I
enough.
get confused.
Yes, you do.
They're all,
It-
always and often.
I don't think Sauron will show up this season. I don't think there's a chance he won't show up next season. There's a chance he won't show up till season 3.
So
in
I'm going to
my
disagree
opinion.
for a couple reasons.
Okay.
So I'm going to start off with a little book lore, and that Sauron is essentially so Pharazôn is king of Numenor, which will probably happen at some point in the show. Spoilers, but Pharazôn essentially goes over and hugely outnumbers Sauron's army. So Sauron just like surrenders and goes with him back to Numenor. But Sauron actually kind of wanted to do that the whole time so that he can get inside Numenor and see what's going on and manipulate the puppets and such. He ends up becoming, even though he gets taken captive and is like a prisoner in Numenor at first, he ends up becoming like this highly esteemed advisor and like I don't know if he's second in command or somewhere where he's highly influential. And then he ends up that ends up being like his whole plan all along. Also, from what we were in the Silmarillion, I don't know if you want to call it a shapeshifter, but he appears as like a sorcerer. He appears as a like large wolf or something. He appears as a serpent. Apparently, he's like a vampire or something. And he also takes his form Anatar, which is supposed to be like a fair form, however you want to interpret that. And that's, I believe, what the form he uses to deceive Celebrimbor.
Yeah, this is coming back to me.
Yeah, so he's very much like a
Which is the
deceiver,
Pharazôn stuff.
manipulator, somebody who's like
Yeah.
using disguises and working behind the scenes to manipulate people and get people to do what he wants them to do. Does that remind you of anyone? Kind of reminds you of our guy Halbrand, who has famous quotes such as "looks can be deceiving," or "I've got
I
my
wouldn't
own
say that
plans,
they
elf."
qualify as famous quotes after airing
Famous is to you.
after a few weeks, but
If it's Halbrand, that'd be quite the reveal. I don't know.
they aren't intelligent enough to write that well.
There's a lot that we don't know yet about where they're going, but right now, my best guess is Halbrand is Sauron.
So that's why you think he wants to stay with Numenor?
No, I don't think he ever wanted to stay with Numenor. I think that's all just a ploy.
He's just tricking Glad. Okay, to get Galadriel to. it's-
Then why go through the effort of building the scene where he wants to be a blacksmith?
just.
Maybe he wants to build something.
But he can't do it in Numenor. He's got to get to
gotta
Middle
gotta
Earth.
go to the furnace with the elves enduring, dude.
There's also
It'd be
maybe the potential that Sauron is multiple characters we've seen already, but we won't go that far. But
maybe.
there's also a compelling theory out there that Halbrand is going to turn out to be the Witch King. That
Bro,
I could
that'd
see
be
as well.
Awesome.
I could see that. Yeah. I could see him just be Wraith.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Because he is the king.
Or is he?
I'm gonna go with he is, just so that they can have discount Aragorn in the show.
Speaking of that, I was literally about to bring this up. To me at least, he looks like Viggo Mortensen a little bit.
Yeah,
A little bit, yeah.
like dude, as soon as he
He-
put on the armor too, I was like, bro,
He
he got cleaned up a little bit.
he could be this is out there, but he could be Arathorn, which is Aragorn's father. That was just I don't know if I
Wait,
put
how would that
too
work
long,
with the
though, to
timeline?
too much stake in
What?
that.
I think that's too long to live though.
They live long.
How long?
Not that long, maybe. But we don't know how far out we are, from
Well, yeah, we
because
do
even
because
if-
Isildur's alive.
Yeah.
Isildur's the base of the time.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
but he's not.
How
Because
much
they-
time
they
passes
live-
between? How much time passes between the battle when Isildur cuts the
Of
ring off Sauron's
Dagorlad
finger
And
and the beginning of the Fellowship of the Ring? Because isn't that a really long time? Because everyone forgets about the ring. Isn't that like hundreds or thousands of years?
yeah, it's a whole age. Never mind. Because Dagorlad is end of the second age and Lord of the Rings is end of the third.
Yeah.
So
That would be
quite the lifespan.
quite the anti-aging
I don't know.
process
It
for
was just like again, I don't put too much stake in that. I don't think it'll come to pass. But it
it
was
could
just
be
like
somewhere in the lineage.
when he put on the
though.
armor, I'm like, dang, he looks like Viggo Mortensen.
I
He could be his
really.
dad.
He could be like somewhere way up in the
Yeah,
Maybe
lineage.
I
it'd
guess
make
for
more
me,
sense if he did go bad though, if he went like the Witch King.
I think it'd be awesome.
Going back to the what's his name? What's the king of Numenor's name? Who isn't the king yet?
Oh, Pharazôn.
Yes, to Pharazôn's plotline. Yeah, I could see them doing that, him becoming the king and being deceived by Sauron, letting Sauron in as an advisor or something. But in order to do that, Muriel is going to have to die. I think he's going to have to take over the throne.
Well, she's
And
going to
I
Middle Earth,
Don't
and so Pharazôn's just going to be presumably
Okay.
like,
The ruler there?
well, Muriel already was just like a regent, not the actual official ruler. She's just like the acting leader. So
Yeah,
presumably Farazan is next up, and he's going to be the next like acting ruler, and he'll probably ultimately take over whether she likes it or not.
that's also possible.
That seems to be where they're heading.
Yeah, but either way, Muriel's gonna have to go, and that's not gonna happen this season.
Well, she's going to Middle Earth.
Yeah, but if Halbrand is Sauron, then he's going with him.
Yeah, so it would be different. It would be different than the war.
Yeah. So, yeah, I guess
I don't put a whole lot of stock into who's who type stuff. I
same.
I think it takes away a lot of the magic in it because I don't. 'Cause I know I do this in
Guys,
certain
Mephisto
films and stuff like
confirmed.
that, but in certain areas, it's just I don't want to have this moment of, oh my gosh, I knew it all along, because I think that takes me out of the film. I very much enjoy getting tricked by movies, even if it's a very simple plot, right? Like even in
Yeah.
Scooby-Doo, I don't watch Scooby-Doo to find out who it is before they do it.
Well, if you can't figure out who it is before they
You're
do
telling
it
me
in
you didn't?
Scooby-Doo, then
Did you ever read Encyclopedia
No,
Brown?
I usually didn't, dude. Even as a kid, I just kind of let myself get swept away in the story, and then they reveal it, and I'm like, oh, okay, now that makes sense.
as a
But
kid,
I
as a
don't,
kid,
but I
yeah,
don't
yeah, yeah,
go
yeah, yeah.
away.
Of
Yeah, but
course,
I don't go into it really.
much different.
I think it takes away a lot of the movie magic, a lot of the cinema magic to just sit here and go, who's who, why's why, well, this lore and this. I think it's incredible that there is this breadth of knowledge, and there is a group of people who love doing that. I think it's awesome. But for this show,
Ain't for me.
I don't see myself wanting to do that because I'm just gonna cheapen whatever happens.
Yeah, I
And
want the
so
reveals.
just live with the reveals.
Yeah,
And
take it as it is.
it's kind of like one of the biggest reasons I don't want to watch any Glass Onion trailers, because this is a mystery movie I'm very excited for. And I want to be tricked. I want to be fooled, or I want to have the reveal, or I want the impact of what they're going to show me to have the impact that they intended.
I disagree.
That's entirely fair. And I think it's awesome, again, that there is a wealth of lore that can be delved into on whatever threads or media or just videos. I think it's incredible. It's just not for
You're saying
me.
that I'm delving too greedily and too deep.
No, not at all. I think you're more than entitled to do it. And I do think it's really admirable that you want to put this much time into a research of a show that you're so passionate about. I think that's awesome. It's just not how I approach shows. So for a lot of these questions about who's who and what's what, I don't put stock in them. It's just I think that eventually there'll be an all character meetup, and that's going to be the tipping point to see how they want to run the next seasons, and they're going to find their ratings on which characters do well. And I have a more mathematical and big budget cinema approach to how this movie or how this show is going to pan out than I do a lore standpoint on how the show's going to turn out. I think if a character isn't well loved according to ratings and reviews, they're going to cut it, or they're going to do a big reveal with it to boost everything. I don't know. I don't trust Amazon
Well, I can say
yet.
that the way they've set it up from the start is that they basically wrote out the entire plot for it's going to be 5 seasons. And so they basically wrote out,
Outlined it.
yeah, they outlined like the entire 5 season plot before they even started making season one. So they already have their whole story in
Oh,
mind
really?
as they're doing this. Yeah.
Well, that's actually pretty admirable. I hope they stick to it, and I hope it's well thought out and well loved, and people who have dived into the lore are behind it, behind the scenes, really
Well,
pouring their hearts and souls
oh
into
boy.
it. But
That's a whole other
I
can
don't
of
know.
worms. But to go back to
Yeah.
what you're saying, we won't even get into any of the people who are mad that it's not exactly like the books. But moving on.
Well, we can talk about it.
Or we could choose not
We're
to.
out of time.
Just to go back to your point for a second about like how you watch shows, I think if a show is done well, then diving into theories or like going back and rewatching stuff to catch things you missed, then that helps you appreciate it more. And it's just a different way of looking at the viewing experience, I think.
I think my only counter to that is that that's something that can be done with this show, though, because you have the major IP of Lord of the Rings. With something like Legion, where all you might really have is the high rewatchability of it, you can't theory craft as much as you can here.
Oh, now it's highly rewatchable, Will.
The more I think, I said
Oh,
from the
yeah?
beginning I loved it.
I know.
I
I
really
know.
did.
No, but
And then he said,
when you've
I'm
been
not really gonna
dissecting theories,
rewatch it.
if you're watching Legion week by week when it came out, I think that would have been really fun diving into
Mm.
theories.
No.
You could have done it for like the cliffhanger of 5 and the cliffhanger of 7. That's about it. Also, like it's because the TV show format lends itself to this type of analysis a lot more
Absolutely,
so
yes.
That's
than
fair.
films. But you know, if you enjoy it, you
Movies are
enjoy it.
better.
I
But
guess kind
I'm
of
with Will. Yeah.
on that point, just our differences in how we view things. Like as soon as the Glass Onion trailer came out, I was watching that.
Yeah.
Like
Well,
if there's a movie I want to see the trailer as soon as it comes out. So
I
we just approach it differently.
I'm literally the exact opposite. If there's a movie that I know I'm going to see, I stay away from trailers 100%. If I am lukewarm on it, I might watch a trailer. And if I don't want to see it, I usually don't see it. But but I mean, yeah, it's different perspectives. It's a good thing
Teasers greater than trailers.
for sure.
Oh, okay. That brings me to my last burning question. When will they create a better TV spot ad for this? Because my goodness, the trailer they have just for the I think it's like 30-second TV spot or whatever that they
Wait, a
ad for
what?
Rings of Power that they play all over the place. So bad. Just give us a trailer of actual footage, not some critic, not like some PA announcer reading what a bunch of critics say about this.
Wait, what
Like
is
I
this
don't
thing
care
you're
what
talking about?
their 30-second ad for Rings of
Critics are
Power
calling
they're
it
playing everywhere.
the best
I
fantasy
haven't,
show
I haven't, I
I
haven't
know.
seen this.
ever.
It's oh my goodness. It's such a terrible trailer. Like just show us some actual footage.
And the
And
Balrog at the
it's
end.
yeah. The trailer
It's
absolutely terrible.
marketing. It's Amazon. It
It's bad
sucks.
marketing.
It's lame.
Oh, it's so
All
bad.
marketing is bad marketing.
Well,
Marketing
that's not true.
is the root of all evil.
Well, hopefully
No,
this show gets
marketing
better.
is a branch of money, and money is the root of all evil.
The love of money is the root. of all evil.
Yes, my bad.
All good.
Out here misquoting scripture.
Well, on that note, Carter, anything you want to say?
Any closing thoughts from you guys? We're gonna wrap it up.
Just please get better at the show. And more
do
hard
you think it's
books.
not getting better? What's your favorite
Um,
episode besides 3?
Oh, besides 3?
Yeah,
5.
same.
Because I feel like it goes 3, 5, everything else, simply because we're getting direction. But I don't think you need 3 hours in episodes 1, 2, and 4 to generate direction and care and kindness. And I think you can do it quicker.
I think you're thinking about it in the movie mindset still, though. Okay. Anything else? Anything else you want to bring up?
So for our next episode, it was my turn to recommend a movie. And given that our next episode will be recorded in October, I decided to pick a movie that I hadn't seen before, which was a decision I had to make on my own. Do I pick something I have or haven't seen? Going with something I haven't seen yet, and it's going to be the highly, highly acclaimed, some would say masterpiece of modern horror from Wes Craven, Scream. And that's what we will be
Okay.
Oh,
I am interested in this. This is gonna be really fun.
I'm surprised.
I
Okay.
didn't see that coming at all. Never would have guessed it, but
All
I
right,
can get behind it. That's for sure.
cool. Stay tuned for next episode, guys.
Okay. All right. Well, as always, thanks for listening.
Carter, this is where you say the
We're all
line. I
waiting
think
for
you close
Carter.
it out every time.
To anyone out there, we are the monkeys, and talking about movies is our business. Thanks for listening.